Right. Good morning, everyone. As you all heard, we are recording this meeting and we have a lot to cover today. So I'm going to just get us started. Welcome on behalf of the Natural Medicine Division. Again, a reminder that we are recording this meeting. Today is Wednesday. It is April 10th, 2024, and it is 9 o'clock. My name is Dominique Mendiola, and I'm the Senior Director for the Colorado Department of Revenue's Natural Medicine Division. Today, we are hosting our second rulemaking meeting as part of establishing a regulatory framework for regulated natural medicine here in Colorado. Our focus today will be on the general requirements for those who want to operate natural medicine facilities in this regulated space. I am joined by my co-chair, Allison Robinette, who is our Director of Policy and Regulatory Affairs for the Natural Medicine Division. Additionally, we are joined by Kyle Lambert, Deputy Senior Director, and Heather Draper, our Communications Manager, both for the Natural Medicine Division. And please note that Heather is our main point of contact for any media requests. We are also joined today, I believe, by Ian Sieb, the Governor's Special Advisor on Cannabis and Natural Medicine. And I understand we have colleagues from the Department of Regulatory Agencies and the Department of Public Health and Environment in attendance today to listen in and support our discussions as they're able. Finally, from the Colorado Department of Law, we have Ross Hugerheide, Christy DeMaria, and Paige Olson here today, who represent the Department of Revenue's Natural Medicine Division and to advise us as needed. And I know we're going to be looking to jump in on our agenda here. Our meeting today will focus on the subjects that you see outlined in our agenda. So please keep in mind that if we hear comments that are on subjects outside of this agenda, we may need to parking lot those items and with preparedness to revisit them later. We will also look to wrap up the meeting a little before noon. So we encourage anyone who wants to make public comments today to go ahead and please sign up. And we want to make sure that we're keeping track of our time and hopefully get everyone an opportunity to speak if you'd like to make a comment. So I know that we'll be sharing some links in the chat so that you have the ability to sign up for that public comment opportunity today. So for those of you who have attended our listening sessions, you've heard our presentation of changes in the law under Proposition 122 and Senate Bill 290, which include an overview of both personal use allowances and the regulatory framework we are charged with implementing. As it relates to the regulatory framework, the law directs the Department of Regulatory Agencies, we oftentimes refer to our partner agency as DORA, to license and regulate facilitators. So that is the one of the roles of DORA will be in the licensing and regulating of facilitators. And those are persons approved by the state to administer natural medicine for adults in a regulated environment. The law also directs the Department of Revenue, DOR, to license and regulate healing centers, cultivations, manufacturers, and laboratory testing facilities. We at the DOR and our partners at DORA are working through separate processes for implementation of the natural medicine program here in the state. So we want to be clear about that and ensure that you are tracking the work of each agency based on your area of interest. Our jurisdiction is different from DORA's, but we are closely coordinating between our agencies to ensure our regulations complement one another and to ensure we are consulting with the Natural Medicine Advisory Board appointed by the Governor of Colorado. And DORA, our partners at DORA, facilitates those board meetings. Similarly, our partners at the Public Health Department, so CDPHE, are also going to initiate rulemaking as part of establishing the statewide program. We're confident in our ability to coordinate between agencies, but most importantly, we want to ensure that you, as our stakeholders, have the clarity you need to track the parts of the implementation that are most important to you. This is why we usually bring this up in our meetings, so we can help folks navigate the process along with us and our partner agencies. So DORA's work will focus on facilitator licensing and regulation. We will share a link to DORA's webpage to be sure you have their information. And the CDPHE's work will primarily focus on laboratory testing, certification, and related requirements. We'll be ready to share information about the work of our partners at CDPHE and the work that they're doing so please stay tuned for updates on that. Ideally by subscribing to receive information from us, the Natural Medicine Division. This is one way that we'll look to share details about how to track the progress that we're engaging in, as well as our partner agencies. Now, for the Department of Revenue, DOR, the purpose of our meeting today is to discuss initial draft regulations for natural medicine operations, specifically base requirements for healing centers, cultivations, manufacturers, and laboratory testing facilities. We look forward to your feedback today to inform our progress and the direction we head on various operational requirements. It's really important here to understand that this is a work in progress, and everyone engaged here today has a really critical role in helping shape these regulations that we're proposing, where what we present and discuss today could serve either as a jumping off point or might look very different from what ends up getting adopted later this year. I'm now going to hand it over to my colleague Allison to take us through an update on participation interest and participation expectations, as everything we work on today will be a part of the formal rulemaking record. Allison.
Thanks, Dominique. So as Dominique mentioned, and at our last meeting and in the follow-up email to that discussion, we shared a survey that our team developed to help us gather more information about who is considering applying to the state licensing authority for a license to operate a natural medicine facility. So far, we've received 39 responses, the majority of which indicate that they are interested in opening a healing center. And 23 of those responses are interested in only opening a healing center and no other license type. I also wanted to share that 13 responses indicated they're interested in some combination of a healing center, cultivation, and manufacturing license, with only 3 that specifically responded they're interested in a cultivation and manufacturing licenses without a healing center. We have not heard from anyone who is interested in only cultivating or only manufacturing. And so I wanted to flag this for everyone in attendance today. If you haven't yet filled out the survey, we'd love to see more responses there to get a better picture of what participation could look like in this new space. We're also seeing in the responses broad interest in either a wellness retreat type healing center or solo practice healing centers managed by a single licensed facilitator. We've gotten some really good feedback on anticipated product needs. For example, how many sessions someone may be planning on having per month or how much product they anticipate producing. And all of this is really helpful to us in wrapping our arms around the scope of participation. So this form will remain open, and I see that it has been shared in the chat. It'll remain open for the foreseeable future, and we ask that anyone who is or may be interested in applying for a license in the future to fill out this survey. So I'll shift now to some of our housekeeping matters. A reminder, as Dominique mentioned, but I know we've had a lot of folks join since the beginning, that this meeting is being recorded, and that recording will be uploaded to our Natural Medicine Division website within 24 hours. Last week, we distributed the agenda and draft rules that will guide us in today's discussion. The draft rules last week were also mistakenly identified packaging and labeling requirements, but anyone who read through the rules realized that there were no packaging and labeling rules included. That is because they will be covered at a future work group meeting on May 22nd. We also realized on Monday morning that the website links to the agenda and draft rules were not published, which we apologize for that inconvenience. Please keep in mind that all materials for all of the work group meetings, including the agenda, draft rules, any resources we want to make sure we're sharing, are saved 1 week before the meeting in our public resources folder. So please feel free to bookmark that folder and check back to see what we've been working on between meetings. And hopefully everyone by this point has signed up for our notifications, which also serve to notify you when we've posted agendas and draft rules in the public folder. And I believe all of those links are being shared right now. So in your review prior to the meeting today, you saw areas of the rules highlighted in blue. This is typical practice for us when we want to make sure that we're providing appropriate context and guidance as to what it is we are doing in these draft rules. Those sections of text that are highlighted in blue are not part of the draft rules, so they wouldn't be in the final proposed rules. But again, just really helping guide our stakeholders in understanding where there may still be questions that we want to hear specifically on, or to provide important context and background. If you have not yet, please sign in using our online form. On the sign-in sheet, you can also note if you would like to make a comment during the meeting today. Please make sure that your microphone is muted when you are not speaking. The chat in Zoom has been disabled, though you can still chat with me, the meeting host, as well as the meeting co-host. I want to remind everyone that all chats are also recorded and will become part of the record. However, if you have comments or questions on the draft rules we're discussing today, please sign up to provide your comment in this forum or submit a written comment, as other folks in the meeting may have similar questions or comments related to yours. We are going to aim to take a brief break around 10:30 today, and are going to try to end a little bit before noon, as Dominique mentioned. If you're interested in making comments on the material, as I said, use the sign-in sheet. There's a section to note when you want to make a comment, and you can go back and edit your sign-in at any point during the meeting. This is important to us that you all are signing in and clearly indicating if you want to make a comment, because it allows us to demonstrate our compliance with the State Administrative Procedure Act that governs rulemaking. When we open up the floor for public comments, we will call on folks in the order that you're signed up, and we ask that you introduce yourself, including your name and any organization you represent. If you're joining the Zoom by phone, you can mute and unmute by dialing *6. If needed, we may interrupt to ensure you are stating or restating who you are and who you represent, so that everyone can be tracking the conversation. We will also be limiting, as we did last time, each comment to 3 minutes. We will be monitoring the queue to make sure we're reserving enough time to get to as many folks as possible during this meeting. Of course, when we're touching on more than one subject, as we are certainly doing today, we will strive to accommodate individuals who sign up for more than one subject matter to make comments on. And if you hit your initial time limit and want to speak some more, please feel free to sign up for an additional public comment period, so we can at least be tracking that. And again, we will try our best to get to everyone who signs up and always welcome written comments. During the public comment period, we would like to know whether you agree or disagree with the draft rules, the reasons for that position, and any alternative approach we should be considering, including proposed language for the rule to the extent you disagree with the draft. Additionally, we ask participants to refrain from using this forum for the promotion of products or services of any kind. And finally, as we've noted in our listening sessions and our previous work group meeting, we appreciate the respect that every person has brought to these forums. So please continue to be respectful of each other in this process. It is required by law, and it's beneficial to the process for the Natural Medicine Division to have varied and differing views of these conversations. So we ask that all participants remain courteous throughout the discussion. Back to you, Dominique.
All right, thanks, Allison. And as you all can see, today's meeting is fully virtual, as we have with our listening sessions and our earlier rulemaking meeting. We are really looking to also provide space to meet in person when we are able to. So please, I just want to remind folks to, as you look at our website and look at each date of our rulemaking meetings that we have coming up, take a look to see where there are opportunities to join us in person. We always appreciate that, where we have the space to be able to accommodate in-person attendance, and also ensure that we are providing opportunities for folks to engage broadly in a hybrid format as they're able to. So we will always have an online option as we are engaging through this process, but just take a look and make sure that you're tracking when there is that in-person attendance opportunity. All right, so I'm going to jump into our guiding principles. As always, we will begin our rules discussion with mention of our guiding principles for rulemaking. These 4 principles state we should collectively strive to ensure that rules are, first, transparent, and that rules clearly communicate expectations of licensees. Rules should be systematic, meaning compliance can be planned and carried out. Rules should be operable, such that licensees can reasonably integrate rule requirements into their process, and the division can appropriately monitor and determine compliance. Finally, rules should be defensible, and that they're grounded in law. So this will guide our process to be sure that we are working productively as we work to develop these rules. As a reminder, we're going to be talking about a handful of different topics, taking comments for those sections, and then moving on to another round of topics. The detailed agenda outlines how we will be proceeding with presenting a group of rules and accepting public comment before we move on to those next set of subjects. Please remember again to sign up using the online sign up form. We will be taking comments in the order that folks sign up. All right, so let's jump into our rules presentation here. We're going to begin with general restrictions. The first section we're going to discuss for comments today are, as I mentioned, general restrictions, but also business records, reporting requirements, license co-location allowances, and product recall and embargo processes. We'll also note any new definitions that we've added, and we welcome feedback on the draft definitions that are relevant to today's discussion. So first with Rule 3005, and that's on page 3 of the proposed rules that we've provided. The proposed rules provide that no individual under the age of 21 years is allowed on the licensed premises, and all licensees are prohibited from consuming natural medicine on the licensed premises or when transporting natural medicine. An exception that we've contemplated is if the licensee is a participant in an administration session, completely separate from their employment. This rule also incorporates a requirement under the Natural Medicine Code, providing that a natural medicine operation cannot operate at the same location as any alcoholic beverage or regulated marijuana license. This is already established under the law, so we are just incorporating this requirement into rule for clarity. That said, some may have noticed that there is a proposed change currently under consideration by the General Assembly under Senate Bill 24-198, which would provide an exception for testing laboratories. We won't get into that in this meeting since the bill is pending, but flagging that for awareness. Also, Rule 3005 also prohibits any licensee from selling regulated natural medicine, which is also prohibited under the law. So we, again, are looking to provide clarity and awareness around circumstances under which we would see this as violating those statutory prohibitions. So moving on to business records rules. Rule 3010, so 3010, and that's on pages 4 through the top of page 6 of our proposed rules, establishes the types of records that must be maintained by a natural medicine operation and that must be provided to the division if requested. The draft rule incorporates some, but not all requirements that we've seen value in the Colorado marijuana rules. However, this is, again, a starting place, and we envision this rule will continue to be further refined and amended as we work through the rulemaking process and hear feedback from all of you. As a starting place, a natural medicine operation must maintain records regarding the following, and I'm just going to list through this briefly. Secure facility information, for example, related to security alarm systems. Advertising records, we recognize advertising will be different and more limited in this space compared to the commercial cannabis space. But also continuing through what we have flagged here, a diagram of the licensed premises, a visitor log of all visitors entering restricted areas, and that's a defined term, restricted area, a waste log, surveillance logs, certain license records, relating to adverse health events, an employee and owner list, and a security plan. And this might be something we could look to merge with the first item that I mentioned regarding secure facility information for ease of reference or understanding. So that's an area we'll continue to look at and welcome feedback on, is how we're even organizing these rules. While we believe most of these requirements are self-explanatory, we did want to highlight our thought process behind the provision requiring internal security controls, and that's reflected on page 5 in subsection 10 of our proposed rules. This requirement is based on our experience in the cannabis space, where over the past few years, we've seen an uptick in targeted crimes like theft and burglary. So we believe it's appropriate here to require licensees to create and maintain a minimum security plan without prescribing the exact content of the plan, this requires licensees to proactively take measures to mitigate these types of safety risks. This is a best practice for addressing security risks, so we wanted to propose it here. This is also consistent with the Natural Medicine Advisory Board's recommendations related to security controls, which we'll get into today's meeting as well. Lastly, we also included in this list of anticipated record requirements a placeholder for stakeholder feedback on what types of participant or administration session records a healing center license may or should be required to maintain. For example, during our listening sessions, we heard suggestions of value in understanding how many sessions a facilitator or healing center provides on a monthly or annual basis, and information related to outcomes of administration sessions. So we wanted to get feedback on this and whether there's an appropriate way to gather this information with meaningful purpose. This is an area we also recognize may be addressed by our partners at DORA in their rules, setting requirements for facilitators. So we would like to hear from stakeholders about whether it is appropriate for healing centers to collect and maintain certain records while not introducing duplication when it comes to requirements. Before we incorporate a full set of proposed record-keeping requirements, we'll need to really work closely with our partners at DORA to ensure that neither set of rules are creating barriers or duplicative requirements for licensees. That's important to us. Of course, we'll take a moment here to remind everyone that under section 44-50-204 of the code, all information that the division and state licensing authority within the Department of Revenue receive from a licensee is confidential and may not be disclosed. And further, all participant records are considered medical records, protected from disclosure in most circumstances. I'm going to hand it over to Allison again to take us through our initial proposed rules on reporting requirements.
Thanks so Monique. So yeah, we're going to jump into Rule 3015 on page 6 of the draft rules that we posted. And before we get into the specifics of reporting requirements, I'll draw your attention to the definition of adverse health event on page 1. The draft definition of adverse health event was formed in close coordination with our partners at the Department of Public Health and Environment, and means any untoward or unexpected health condition or occurrence associated with the use of natural medicine or natural medicine product. This could include any unfavorable and unintended sign, including a hospitalization, emergency department visit, medical visit, abnormal laboratory finding, outbreak, death, which is non-motor vehicle, symptom or disease temporally associated with the use of natural medicine product, and may include concerns or reports on the quality, labeling, or possible adverse reactions to natural medicine or natural medicine product transferred by or manufactured by a natural medicine business. On page 6, we propose natural medicine businesses will be required to report any adverse health events or any crimes committed on the licensed premises. We have separated out the requirements for all licensees regarding adverse health events and requirements for healing centers. And this is because we believe that any licensee who learns of an adverse health event has a responsibility to report it to the division within 48 hours, while healing centers have a responsibility to report any adverse health event within 24 hours. Our expectation is that licensees will do some due diligence to gather as much information as they can to help inform a report on the adverse health event. Additionally, healing centers must report any incident that requires emergency response or medical attention. One reason for these heightened expectations for healing centers is that they will have the most direct information related to any adverse health events that occur on the licensed premises. That said, we recognize that a participant may have a challenging or confronting experience that may or may not rise to the level of an adverse health event, as we've defined it. So our objective at a minimum is to capture events that require medical attention or emergency response, and appreciate any feedback folks have on the definition and this reporting requirement. And then second, in this rule, there's a requirement to report crimes relating to the diversion of natural medicine, including any theft, burglary, sales, or other types of diversion of regulated natural medicine. A natural medicine division must report any crimes to the division within 14 days. So we'll now shift to discussing the licensed premises and co-location requirements in Rule 3105 on page 7. Before we get into the specific allowances for co-locating licenses, we have included a draft definition for administration area and a draft definition for restricted area on page 1. We define these terms because they will be important for rules setting expectation requirements, as we see in Rule 3105. The definition of an administration area means a designated and secured area within the licensed premises of a healing center where regulated natural medicine and regulated natural medicine products may be transferred to a participant, where a participant may consume regulated natural medicine and regulated natural medicine products, and where administration sessions may take place. No one under the age of 21 years old is permitted in an administration area, and the administration area may not be part of the restricted area. Restricted areas mean, Restricted area means areas of the licensed premises where regulated natural medicine is cultivated, manufactured, tested, or stored. And only employee licensees and owner licensees may have access to the restricted areas without supervision or some documentation on a visitor log. And while not defined, when we speak of co-location in the context of these rules, we are referring to when 2 or more licenses are licensed at the same location or address. With these definitions in mind, we'll turn to Rule 3105 again on page 6. This rule allows any healing center, cultivation facility, or products manufacturer to be located at the same location as another license if both licenses have identical owner licensees. All shared locations must clearly designate the common areas, restricted areas, and administration area in the diagram of the premises. If the shared location has a healing center license, the rule makes clear that administration areas cannot overlap with restricted areas. And this rule does not allow for any co-location of testing facilities with any other natural medicine businesses. And this relates to requirements that we anticipate regarding the potential conflicts of interest with testing facility licensees owning other types of licenses. We'll shift now to local safety inspections.
Good morning. Thanks, Allison. I'll take us through a couple of the remaining rule presentations before we open it up for comments. So starting with local safety inspections. To wrap up licensed premises rules for this part, we'll turn to Rule 3130 on page 13, which notes that licensees may be subject to local safety inspections such as fire department inspections or building and code inspections. Additionally, this rule requires licensees to comply with local jurisdiction requirements related to fire safety ordinances and regulations. This rule is an example of how the division will be coordinating with local jurisdiction in the event there is some issue discovered during a building inspection that the applicant or licensee must address. Moving on to shifting our focus on product recalls and embargoes. In Rule 3215 on pages 14 through 17, the draft rule establishes recall expectations. This rule applies to all natural medicine business licensees. The recall rules mirror the rules from our experiences regulating the cannabis industry, which were created to protect public health and safety from any contaminated or mislabeled products. And we see great value in setting these standards and expectations from the outset, given that the natural medicine model is therapeutic in nature, and there are opportunities for us to be proactively considering public health concerns for both participants and workers cultivating, manufacturing, or testing these products. The rule establishes that the division may either request a recall or the natural medicine business may initiate a recall on its own. If the business decides to initiate a recall, it must let the division know at least 24 hours prior to letting other licensees know of the recall. Cultivation facilities and product manufacturers must have a written recall plan in place. This plan must include a way that they will evaluate any complaint they receive to determine the hazard and safety of the product, undertake any quarantine measures, and determine how best to identify and secure any distributed product. The recall plan also requires that cultivation facilities and manufacturers have a record of who they have distributed the products to and to notify their distribution list. Finally, the plan must include how the licensee will remove the product from any licensed facilities. Next, let's look at Rule 3220 on pages 17 and 18, outlining the circumstances and requirements where an embargo may be necessary. In addition to voluntary recalls as outlined in Rule 3215, embargoes are a tool that our partners at the Public Health Department utilize to address public health risks related to a number of different industries, including wholesale food manufacturing, and will allow our agency to act quickly in the event there is product that poses an immediate risk to participants or workers. And of course, we would be hoping that these would be limited circumstances, but with needs to be prepared and clear about what this would look like if there are issues that require a process like this to be employed. Under the draft rule, an embargo is initiated with a notice of embargo. The rule provides what the notice must include because we want to ensure we're transparent in our actions, particularly when it could mean that product is being pulled back from distribution. The notice will identify the permitted activities regarding the regulated natural medicine or regulated natural medicine product subject to the embargo, and will require a licensee to initiate a recall of the product. Regulated natural medicine or regulated natural medicine products subject to an embargo must be physically segregated. The product subject to an embargo may only be transferred or transported subject to the rules or division approval, for example, to another license for destruction. And the division may lift, revise, or extend an embargo upon agreement with the licensee. The draft rules permit a licensee that receives a notice of embargo to submit a written request for a hearing on the notice of embargo. The procedural rules regarding the hearing process will be included in rules discussed at a later work group. Due process is a significant piece of this rule and will help hold both the division and licensees accountable when this type of situation arises. I think that concludes our rules presentation, and I'll send it back to Dominique. Are we prepared to open it up for public comment?
Yes, thanks, Kyle. So yeah, we just hit our initial set of subjects that we are looking to get public comment on. So thanks for your attention to all the topics that we have covered so far today. We are now going to move into the first public comment opportunity today, and then we're going to follow that with a break. As you all prepare for your public comments, we appreciate your feedback and just want to emphasize again, we are open. We are really interested to hear what you have to share and open to making sure that we're hearing you as we take these rules into another phase and see how your feedback helps us develop these rules further and determine, what is necessary, what might need to be refined. So we are looking forward to hearing from you. Allison.
Yes, we will start with Dory.
Hi, I thought I had signed up for the security requirements, but I'm happy to, should I speak to that now?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. So I was basically referring to the rules around needing the impenetrable walls, the surveillance rooms, the storage rooms, and the secure transport. And I was just considering that for the amount of product that a solo facilitator or a small practitioner might have at their property, this might be a lot of, I'm sorry?
Sorry, please continue.
This might be a lot of expense for the practitioner in terms of a financial stressor and limit some small solo practitioners from being able to, be able to do this because the amount of financial need to even create special surveillance rooms. Many practitioners have one small office. They're working kind of by themselves. They're renting kind of one room, or one small office in a larger complex, and having a surveillance room and these walls and the administrative area might not be possible. And so, especially because many practitioners might have less than $100 worth of product at a time, if that, in their premises, because a lot of practitioners will be seeing maybe 1 to 3 clients a week. And even that might be a lot of participants to see per week. So just thinking about the surveillance rooms and the walls and kind of the administrative area maybe not being accessible for solo practitioners because they'd be having such a small amount of product, wondering if that would be entirely necessary, and maybe having some exemption rules for some solo practitioners who will not have access to that large amount of space and not be able to financially have that kind of surveillance at their location.
Great, thank you, Dory. And just for our rulemaking record, if you could just state your name and who you represent, whether it's yourself or an organization.
Yes, my name is Dory Lewis. I represent myself. I own a private practice called Reflective Healing LLC.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your comment. And I do recognize that, and why you asked the question on whether you should, continue with your comment is because you hit on some items that we will be covering in a moment after our break, but still welcome those comments, recognizing we've had the proposed rules out. So I just want to make sure that our attendees are aware that some of what Dory just covered in her comment will touch on some of the items that we're going to be presenting here in a bit.
Great. We'll go next to Tasha Poinsett.
Hello, are you hearing me? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for having me on. My name is Tasha Poinsett. I am representing the Healing Advocacy Fund, a nonprofit. And there's a couple different things I wanted to comment on and also just ask for, I think, clarity around. So the first one is the restriction on individuals under 21 years of age on the licensed premises. I think that, this makes sense in the context of a space that's just a healing center, but I'm curious about spaces, situations where there's co-location with, for instance, a healthcare facility. If there's a common area that's part of the licensed premise of the healing center, but is also a part of this, healthcare facility, could there be some sort of recognition of that to allow people under 21 years of age, given that a lot of healthcare locations probably serve a range of different clients and there are other areas of focus. So just wanting to look for some kind of flexibility there to better allow that co-location and integration with existing healthcare locations. And then I think similar to that, into a comment that I made last session, we anticipate and have heard that there are some location types that might want to incorporate natural medicine services, but not make it sort of a mainstay of the business that they're running. And in those situations might want to have a designated administration area when they're serving clients, and otherwise use that space for other purposes, given that segmenting off an administration area only for that use on a permanent basis might not make sense if they're only seeing clients for certain weeks or certain times of the year. And again, could see issues around that restriction of somebody 21 being there if during the time they're not using it for natural medicine services, they might have other purposes that might include a broader range of ages. So I think a solution to both of these could be some sort of license type that's either a temporary license type that allows that greater flexibility in terms of the use of space, or at least on the first part, specifically allowing people within those common areas if it's a co-located type of situation. And then the second thing I wanted to comment on in relation to co-location is the prohibition on co-location with alcohol or marijuana licenses, which I think makes sense. But what I wanted to clarify was the word location, what that means, because we've gotten some questions where maybe coming back to Dory's comment that there might be like a large commercial building that has an office area in it, there's therapists separate, completely separate part of that location. There could be other unrelated businesses. So if that would apply, or if it would, that the location type just can't be shared if it's at the same licensed premise of the healing center. So I just think clarification there might be helpful. And in terms of the reporting requirements, definitely encourage collecting information about the basics in terms of number of sessions per client. And it looks like I ran out of time, so maybe I can pick this up if I'm called on again. Is that?
Yeah, thank you, Tasha, for being cognizant of that. And we will come back to you if we have time after our set of comments for this section or the next. And thank you for your comments. Really appreciate the questions and insights that you shared. Want to, first of all, before I forget, really encourage you and anyone else to submit written comments with proposed rule language. We're certainly open to hearing all the feedback and also seeing at different approaches to how we can be clear in the rules what is allowed. I also wanted to flag that Senate Bill 290, the Natural Medicine Code, does say we are to promulgate rules for requirements to prevent the diversion or transfer of natural medicine to persons under 21. And in this work, especially in these draft rules, we looked significantly to the Natural Medicine Advisory Board's recommendations, which also included a recommendation to limit access to the restricted areas to persons who are over 21, as well as licensed premises. So recognizing that, we are certainly open to the feedback and appreciate sort of the nuanced approach here and other considerations we should be taking in. Okay, great. We will go next to Dr. Shannon Hughes.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I'm here today just representing myself and our private practice. We have a mental health practice that we've been operating for many years, several years now, and it's myself. I work in the coaching realm, and my partner is a therapist. And so, you know, we do talk therapy, we do life coaching, we do ketamine assisted psychotherapy for several years now. And, you know, I have a number of clients who are young adults, age 18 to 20. So this is very relevant for our practice also, would we have to give up those clients if we also wanted to have a licensed center where we can do administration sessions on occasion when indicated with our adult clients. And you know, I'm operating on such a small scale and having like a regular mental health practice, we'd likely only need like a small amount of psilocybin in our office space at any given time. If we did, you know, one natural medicine administration session a week, which is probably the most I could imagine doing. And I think we represent like maybe the majority of practitioners who want to enter this space, who are like practitioners of various backgrounds who already have a regular practice where they use different modalities and they want to integrate this. So it's not going to be a full-time 5 days a week, you know, operation. That would be a very large operation. I think most people wanting to enter the space are going to be operating on a much smaller scale. And so having, you know, maybe $50 worth of psilocybin mushroom product, you know, in their office during any given week, or a couple $100 for like a month's supply. I just felt like the draft rules around like the surveillance and the security and, you know, restricted areas is like out of proportion with what is actually being regulated and such a small quantity, especially considering that we have personal use and people can, you know, grow mushrooms, they can share mushrooms, they can transport them and have them on them. And so like what the rules sort of effectively make it, you know, really high bar logistically and financially. And for small practitioners like us who just have our regular practices in mental health, would make it just like inoperable. Like we would not be able to integrate these rules into our practice. And so I feel like it would be sort of leaving the market almost entirely open to like much larger scale operations, which I think is fairly antithetical to what the voters, you know, the intention that the Colorado voters voted on in Prop 122. So I would just urge like reasonable accommodations for small scale practitioners like us, maybe a locked safe and inventory logs, and just, you know, for $50, $100 worth of product, just trying to make it like a little bit more accessible and reasonable. And please, you know, reconsidering the age, like how we might protect folks under 21, you know, we'd hate to give up our young adult clientele to be able to do a couple mushroom sessions a month. That would be a really hard choice for us to make. So thank you for considering these comments and thank you for all your work on this.
Dr. Hughes, thank you so much for your comment. Just want to note appreciation for you're hitting on really what we touched on earlier, the guiding principles and the operability piece specifically, which is applicable to both us from the regulatory perspective, but also when it comes to those who are interested in being a part of this regulated space. It's really critical and just a great example of how you were providing us examples based on your lived experiences, professional experience, and how it would impact and create barriers if you were looking to work in this space. So I just want to highlight that and appreciate how you framed and described your comment and the examples provided. Very helpful. Thank you.
We will go next to Michaela Vaught.
Hello, thank you for taking the time to hear me today. I appreciate all of your work in getting the draft rules where they are, and creating a platform for everybody to participate. I want to acknowledge I agree with the comments so far made by Dory Lewis, Tasha Poinsett, and Dr. Shannon Hughes. Have a lot of overlap with Dr. Hughes in my approach to practice, as well as the realistic and logistical pieces of my practice. Kind of going back again to the initial reason we're developing this, Colorado's program, we differ greatly from Oregon's in that in our Colorado law, we're explicitly allowing healthcare professionals to incorporate our skills and training as licensed clinicians within the natural medicine practice. This aims to support participant safety. It allows psilocybin therapies to exist as an additional modality within a range of therapeutic options available to support mental health and well-being. Overly burdensome and expansive rules will only decrease access and ultimately safety by creating barriers to the integration with our existing health frameworks. This also poses a risk of pushing facilitators and participants back into the underground if they're facing inaccessible, overly burdensome requirements. Unfortunately, the rules as written are inoperable, seemingly unrealistic, and very financially unreasonable for many potential facilitators because they impose facility requirements that would effectively prohibit multi-use locations, clinical facilitators, small facilitator practices, solo practice healing centers. Many of the first round of clinical facilitators are going to be those in private practice, and the current draft rules don't feasibly support any type of solo practice healing center. Requiring a dedicated licensed premise with a restricted area, surveillance room, and administration area is not financially feasible. To the extent that some facilitators do raise money to meet those cost prohibitive burdens, that cost is only going to be passed on to the participant, creating additional barriers for equitable access. Per a rough estimate I obtained from a security surveillance industry specialist, I'm being given a ballpark cost that includes materials and labor, including cameras, licenses for the cameras, software for footage storage and surveillance, of about anywhere between $15,000 and $20,000 to use a HIPAA compliant surveillance system. This does not include costs with obtaining city permits and blueprints for engineering. Furthermore, the current definition of administration area and licensed premises specifically prohibits anyone under 21 to be on site. Private practice therapists who become clinical facilitators and for whom this is only one modality among several therapeutic approaches would then be prevented from working with any clients under the age of 21, even in context when psilocybin services are not the interventions being used for those clients. Simple solution might be to permit temporary administration areas or temporary licensed premises that must meet regulatory requirements, provided the requirements are workable when there's actually natural medicine present for storage or for administration. Alternative could be to remove some of the restrictions around licensed premises, including age restrictions, and expressly permit shared bathrooms, reception areas, file storage, and administrative areas with non-licensed activities, or to exempt small operators from the majority of the security requirements, or provide a subsidy program for smaller businesses and private practices that can't feasibly cover all of those requirements.
Thank you for the comment, and also just want to highlight appreciation for, as you identified issues, including operability issues, that you're also following that up with proposed ways to resolve those and what you would see as a more operable way to approach these requirements and priorities. So thank you for that.
Great. We'll go next to Barine Majuska, and please correct me on pronunciation.
Hi, thank you. My name is Barina Majewska. I'm an attorney at the law firm of Vicente, and I wanted to thank you for all the hard work you guys have put in on these rules. It shows. My concern echoes many of the earlier comments that the rules regarding licensed premises may be overly restrictive and could limit individuals from providing natural medicine services at their existing offices. In addition, these rules may be cost prohibitive for any clinical facilitators who want to include natural medicine services as part of their broader care offerings. Specifically, the rule that no one under the age of 21, as others mentioned, be permitted on the premises, and the rule requiring the premises to meet all of the restrictions can be very limiting for facilitators who want to operate a multi-use premises. As you guys know, many facilitators will either want to or need to operate the premises for the facilitation of natural medicine services at some times, while at other times providing complementary or different services such as healthcare, therapy, body work, other modalities. And it'll likely be cost prohibitive for these individuals to maintain a dedicated space that meets all of the natural medicine requirements at all times, including during the times that no natural medicine services are being provided on the premises. I do think there's multiple different ways to solve this. Again, as others have commented on, to my mind, the easiest would probably be for you guys to consider not requiring the licensed premises to meet all of these restrictions at times when natural medicine is not being used on the premises. Thank you again for your efforts.
Thank you so much. We'll go next to Brian Yoder.
Hi there. Thanks again for all of the work that you guys have done. We really appreciate it. And, you know, I know that you guys we got to start somewhere, and you guys are doing the very best that you can. And so we're kind of borrowing from what we've learned with the cannabis industry, but I just wanted to echo that this is really, it is a different space. And I feel like folks that the last 5 or 6 speakers that spoke before me probably stated it more eloquently than I can. But what I would say is that, like, I'm a therapist, so I'm just outside of Fort Collins. I own a business. It's called Catalyst Counseling and Coaching. So I'm a licensed professional counselor. I work with a number of different modalities. I work with a lot of clients that have trauma in their lives. And so I'm really interested in bringing some of this natural medicine into my practice. I'm not looking to be, like many people, and what has been stated before, like just a natural medicine provider. I'm not looking to just have a business where I'm just selling mushrooms or cultivating mushrooms, but basically just trying to figure out a model of how I can bring it to my clients if it makes sense and it's appropriate for them. And so I think just these points have been made pretty clear, actually very clear from folks that spoke before, like this idea of the security system. Like many of us, we rent office space, or we might operate out of our homes where we like live out of one level and our office is on another level. You know, for me, like Dr. Hughes mentioned, you know, I might have 1 day or 2 days a week max where I'm doing some medicine work. And then I'm using other types of therapy on my other days. And so really just ask that you guys consider those of us that are, you know, operating as therapists in kind of a small way. Like, we want to integrate this in, but we won't be able to do it if the restrictions are too great of a cost. And I think in the end, that would end up hurting the community and hurting our clients because we're not able to provide that. Yeah, I think I'll leave 20 seconds for someone else. And thank you again for your time and your consideration.
Hey, Brian, thank you so much for your comment. And also just, I'll take the 20 seconds to respond with just a couple of things. One, just from everything we've heard already, really valuable feedback. And this is something we even hit on in our listening sessions, is understanding that there might be a need for us to consider how we are distinguishing some of these requirements, and where there is in the law mandatory rulemaking subjects we need to hit on. And so I appreciate your acknowledging that this is, as we noted, a starting place. We are prepared for these rules, these proposed rules, to evolve in some areas significantly based on the feedback we're hearing, and taking into account how requirements that might apply appropriately to manufacturing facilities, cultivations, or labs might need to look very different from what we're considering as it relates to healing centers where administration sessions would occur. So appreciate that, and also recognizing that as we go through these proposed rules, we're looking at, yes, in some cases, and we want to make sure we're flagging where we might be taking certain portions of what we've learned and established on the cannabis side, but also looking at, for example, what Oregon is doing as a starting point, but also wanting to understand what has been successful or where has that created challenges as Oregon has rolled out their program, as well as what the advisory board has recommended. So we're really looking broadly from different angles and taking from different places, but another critical source is the feedback from our stakeholders. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, we will go next to Josh Capel.
Thank you very much, and and thank you for for putting together these rules. Big picture, I think like when we look at the difference between cannabis and psychedelic care, I think the rules should really try and match the potential harm that we're looking at. And and one of the harms around psychedelic care is for people who are really kind of like not forced into, but encouraged to get natural medicine services when they shouldn't, when they don't need. And if we set up, like how the rules are set up, they really encourage like larger facilities that only provide natural medicine services. And so in effect, these businesses are going to potentially encourage people to get natural medicine services that don't need it. And so like, to really address this issue, we really need to allow for multi-use and more flexible premises. And so this, and I think the rules that as they're drafted around security and restricted areas are really, really good for cultivation manufacturing, but just for healing centers, it's just a little bit different. And so, I think one piece is like, I understand there's a need to limit access to those under the age of 21. This can be done by limiting the 21 number to administration areas or to restricted areas and not the entire licensed premise. I think that's like a good way for flexibility. I also think like spelling out like on the co-location requirements, there might be some facilities that like have common or like shared administration areas. So, like the rules under it's like 3005B. Actually, it's not it's the co-location requirements under B. It seems to like suggest like restricted areas and administration areas can't be sort of co-located. So maybe just clarifying that the whole licensed premise can be shared, so you can have folks as potentially MDMA or ketamine therapy, or ketamine therapy is available now, or MDMA therapy rolls out in the future, using the same administration area for therapy and these purposes. And then also, I think one thing that was like pretty confusing is in 3005 around sales. There's a prohibition on sales from licensees to individuals. And I think really what we're trying to say here is like sales for licensees to individuals for consumption outside of the administration area, and not just the licensees for individuals across the board. One of the sort of intentions around sort of this like multi-healing center location was like one healing center would provide natural medicine services and the other wouldn't. So there's a little bit more flexibility for 280E tax purposes, understanding that we don't understand exactly how 280E is going to be applied to this industry at all. So just being very flexible there seemed to make sense. It seemed like the purpose of that rule is really the limitation for sales outside of the consumption area. So thank you, thank you very much, and just wanted to reiterate, just like asking for flexibility around multi-use premises. We're not encouraging people to get psychedelic care. It may not be appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. And if you could introduce yourself and who you may represent for our record.
Josh, if you're still on and can jump back in briefly. Or we can come back to him. So yeah, just want to remind folks as you all are making comments, and it's important for our purposes of our rulemaking record. It is a requirement for us to maintain certain information, to have a complete rulemaking record. And this is based on the requirements of the Colorado Administrative Procedure Act, that when you make your comment, to please introduce yourself and who you represent. If you don't at the start, we will look to remind you to do that when you conclude your comment, but we can come back to Josh unless you can do that briefly for the record.
Yes, sorry about that. My name is Josh Capel. I'm an attorney. I work with Vicente LLP, also senior advisor of the Healing Advocacy Fund, and my comments are just mine. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Josh, we'll go next to Michael Briggs.
Apologies, struggling to get off mute there. Thank you so much. My name is Michael Briggs. I represent Spiritus Oregon, a Portland, Oregon psilocybin manufacturer. I am also a Denver resident, a Colorado citizen, and will be looking to operate in Colorado as a manufacturer as well. So I've got a couple of comments today. One is in the definition section, if you guys can add a definition around the term embargo and how it differs from a recall. Second, my comment about advertising. So this is for 3010B3. I think this is a pretty overbroad rule. There's no definition around what is actually included here. So like, is my website considered an advertisement, my social media account? And really what you're looking to collect, the audience composition data, I think is a little bit off target here. Per the law, advertising is prohibited from misappropriating American tribes, prohibited from being excessively commercialized, and prohibited from targeting individuals under 21. So that's directed advertising, not passive consumption or incidental consumption of individuals under the age of 21. So I think that should be spelled out a little bit more clearly. Finally, my other comment is on 3105 A1 through 3. So this is around co-location. And so one of the things that I think is a potential safety concern here is around the co-location of healing centers and manufacturing facilities that are performing extractions with flammable solvents. Flammable solvents, highly flammable solvents like ethanol and methanol are very common extraction methods. And individuals who are consuming large doses of psilocybin, so that'd be like 10 milligrams or above, especially once you go over 25 milligrams, are going to be very incapacitated, both physically and mentally. And once you're at, very large doses of psilocybin, the maximum allowable in Oregon is 50 milligrams of psilocybin. Individuals are basically going to be physically incapacitated, unable to, walk almost entirely, very mentally incapacitated. So in the event of, let's say a fire or an explosion or anything of that nature, it is going to be very, very difficult to evacuate these individuals. And so I think this does create quite a dangerous situation that can easily be avoided by prohibiting the co-location of healing centers with manufacturers who are looking to use flammable solvents or explosive solvents. And that's my set of comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate those comments, and did just want to quickly respond to draw attention to your comments about the advertising. Appreciate those, and would love those comments in writing as well, because we will be digging more into specific advertising requirements at our May 22nd work group meeting. And so what we included here for the draft rules today was, to your point, a sort of broad sort of umbrella record keeping requirement, but we have not developed those draft rules for what specific advertising requirements may look like. Okay, great. We will go next to Dana McDowell. Dana, are you still on and able to unmute?
Yep, sorry, didn't hit the unmute. My name is Dana McDowell. I'm a private practice psychotherapist representing New Beginning Psychotherapy and myself here in Denver. I echo a lot of what's already been said by private practice therapists, so I won't repeat that. But one concern I have is when I do ketamine work, for example, I sometimes have my adult patients being picked up by their adult but under 21-year-old children. And so that would be exceptionally problematic if I'm not allowed to have anyone under 21 in the facility, if that is my client's mode of transportation. And so I appreciate that also being considered. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. We'll go next to Carolyn Holland.
Hi there. My name is Carolyn Holland. My background is as an advanced practice nurse, specifically a nurse anesthetist, and I'm currently in the CIIS program to become a facilitator. I will be applying for a clinical facilitator license and hoping to use that either as a contractor with therapy groups or as a private practitioner for administration. So I wanted to agree with all of the comments that have been offered about the security part. Also, I would like to add a comment about the age of 21. As we all know, the legal age of consent in Colorado is age 17. And I think it would be helpful if we looked at all of the phase 2 and 3 studies to find out at what was the lower age range that they accepted for participants. And also, there was mention in my last class with CIIS that there was going to be a phase 3 study for the use of psilocybin in participants less than age 18, even down to the age of 7. And so I think it would be helpful looking at some different parameters with age instead of just picking the age of 21. So I have a question about how that age was chosen, if someone could help me with that. Secondly, I am very pleased that there's going to be an adverse event reporting system, and I would just encourage that you also collect the denominator for the adverse events, because it's very easy to only submit adverse event reports, but it would be helpful for clinicians to also keep a record, or you to ask for records of how many participants they have had in total. So we have the denominator and the numerator for adverse events. And that's all I have. So thank you for your hard work. I appreciate you being open to our comments, and I look forward to every meeting that you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments and feedback. I do want to just, you had one question that I want to make sure that if we have an opportunity to hit on that, we can, related to the age limitation. So looking to our colleagues at the Department of Law, Ross Hugerheid, if you're able to jump in on that.
Hey, thank you, Dominique. Ross Hugerheid with the Colorado Department of Law. Did want to respond on the 21 and clarify that is a statutory requirement created in SB 23290, and there is no ability for the division to deviate from that 21 age restriction for participants. If rules were to conflict with statute, those would be invalid. And so that is something that I did feel was necessary to clarify, that, you know, where the statute provides requirements, the rules cannot change those requirements, and that 21 age restriction for participants is statutory. So thanks, Dominique, for the chance to provide that clarity.
Thank you.
Okay, we will go next to Bia Campbell.
Hi, Bia Campbell, Strategy 64. Two very quick comments. First one on page 1025, definition of administration area. We respectfully ask the division to please remove the "and secure area" from the first line there, just because it links to the security standards or 3110, and I think it can get a little confusing of like how secure the administration area needs to be. And then second, on the last sentence of the same paragraph, no one under the age of 21. My idea here is, I agree with a lot of what was said today. I was thinking, can we remove that last sentence and move it to 3005, letter D, and then rewrite that paragraph that currently reads that you shall not allow individuals under 21 in the licensed premises, to say something along the lines of while the facilitator is being administering the natural medicine, the 21 shall not be present, etc. Linking to the usage instead of the location. I think that will solve a lot of the comments that were made here today, which I agree with. Speaking of 3005, general restrictions on page 3 on letter C, I would also ask that we clarify, just because when we're talking about sales and donation, because we're not defining either of those terms, when there is, an exchange between the facilitator and the patient is going to be paying for the service, which is going to be the session plus the product. And I get a little scared that the way it's currently written, it could be interpreted that transaction is a sale on in itself. My suggestion would be to, after the end of the first sentence, after product to individual, and then create a comma there outside of facilitator services, just to clarify that. Thank you so much. Those are my comments today.
Thank you, Bia. We will go next to Stephanie Crone. Stephanie, are you still with us and able to unmute? And as a reminder for any folks who may have decided through the course of hearing other comments that you are interested in making a comment, please be sure to use the online form that is in the chat to sign up to provide comments. We will not be taking any raised hands today. Okay, we will go next to, we'll come back to Stephanie if she's able to unmute later. And we will go now to Clarice Snell, Baumgartner.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, excellent. Hi, thank you all. This is really lovely to be able to be included in this conversation. My name is Dr. Clarice Snell Baumgartner. I'm a physician. I'm speaking on behalf of my own solo practice. I'm an internal medicine doctor here in Colorado with 15 years of working with advanced geriatrics, palliative care, and end-of-life populations. I'm currently involved in psilocybin research at Anschutz involving advanced cancer patients, and I want to ultimately incorporate this work into my practice as one of many tools for helping people, especially in that end of life setting. As a sole proprietor, I share a lot of other people's concerns about these proposed rules and regulations and how it might make it cost prohibitive or overly burdensome and ultimately inoperable for a lot of us who are working as small scale operators in Colorado who have other healthcare services we're providing, and we're hoping to incorporate this as an occasional, maybe once a week, several times a month, and not an all day, every day sort of operation. I think the proposed rules for healing centers designating an administrative area, restricted area, requiring surveillance is just potentially going to be too cost prohibitive. I'm also very passionate about the setting in which these medicines are provided, particularly for the frail and end-of-life populations, and having flexibility in where these medicines can be worked with is going to be paramount in serving those populations in particular. So being able to work with people in their own homes, especially if they're immobile, I think will be a critical option for folks. And I'm not sure how that would work in combination with the currently proposed regulations. The rules around transportation may make that difficult or impossible for facilitators like myself to provide this in home. And also I'm worried about accessibility in rural areas. And could a provider go into a rural area with these medicines under the current regulations, or is it going to be very firm in that it needs to be a dedicated building? I applaud that Colorado's program, unlike Oregon's, will allow healthcare professionals like myself to incorporate natural medicines into their current practices. And I just hope that we can have a situation where the rules aren't overly burdensome or expensive to allow for that to happen. Thank you so much for listening to my comments.
Doctor, thank you very much for your comments and interest in being a part of this space. We appreciate that. And also just recognizing that from what we've heard so far, we are picking up on themes here related to operability and other feedback. So we really appreciate that. That's important as we're identifying folks saying that they agree with other specific comments or what they've heard so far. Really helpful for us to be able to pick up on those themes to inform our continued development of these rules and updates and needing to revisit sort of where we started here. I will share as well that the law does contemplate allowances for licensed facilitators to provide sessions at a private residence. And we'll just note that while there might be some need to coordinate between the Department of Revenue, the work that we're doing here today, and the work of DORA, our partners at the Department of Regulatory Agencies, that we do anticipate that there's likely to be more of a focus and work related to that piece of this is where facilitators are engaging in administration sessions at a private residence. And so I want to make sure that we're encouraging folks to also make sure that they're following the work of our partners at DORA that will hit on some of these subjects that we're hearing about here today. So thank you so much.
All right, we will go next to Dr. Angela Beers.
Hello, thank you for this opportunity. I am representing myself as an Indigenous community member as well as a psychologist. So there's lots of things that can't be covered in 3 minutes. One of the first things out is that there are many issues regarding Native and Indigenous rights of spiritual and religious practices. And I can't get into that right now, since the focus of this meeting is pushing forward with regulations of the regulated market. So I will focus on that for now. So rules and regulations regarding age restrictions in children and adolescents on site need to be worked on more transformatively. For example, there needs to be a consideration for the family and inclusion of that and what that might look like. An individual earlier had mentioned that there might be adolescents picking up their parents. I propose that there, on sites that are available to do this, that there is the option of childcare that, you know, obviously will need to be considered what that could look like because it's an accessibility issue when parents can't find for extended period of time childcare. Also, restrictions around people having known histories of harm, not just people, but organizations that have legal charges with wrongful death suits, leading training and leading the movement in general as authority. That really needs to be looked at and considered. Documentation and record keeping issues concerning subpoenas. I know that you mentioned earlier that there, in some cases, in most cases, they're protected. However, there are lots of cases where people end up in court for various reasons and their healing practices are used against them. So really, you have to look at, with a fine-tooth comb, with a variety of individuals, what documentation should look like, if any, should be there. And then ethics around dual relationships pertaining to the individuals who are facilitating, participating in any way or any capacity, whether they're at a site, they're in a private residence, their potential for exploiting and abusing the power differential, not just in a sexual relationship, but in other areas. DORA has some pretty significant blind spots already, as that is in the mental health profession pertaining to that. And I hope that, again, though I didn't have enough time to speak on the Indigenous issues here, that this is something that is prioritized above all. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Beers. And of course, we recognize that 3 minutes is not a lot of time to share our thoughts on so many different concepts and rules, which is why we always invite everyone to provide us with written comments using the written comment form online, that we really do review every single one of the written comments that we receive and think about whether how or whether to incorporate and in what capacity to incorporate comments directly into the rules. And often if proposed rule language is included in the comment, we will put that proposed rule language into the draft. I also just wanted to take this opportunity to note that 3 minutes, while short, is so that we can ensure we can get to as many different folks as possible to provide comments during today's meeting. We'll go next to Henny Lasley.
Good morning. My name is Henny Lasley, and I serve as the executive director of an organization called One Chance to Grow Up. Just for a little background, because I don't know many of you, our organization formed after Colorado voters passed Amendment 64 back in 2012, which of course legalized and allowed for the commercialization of marijuana in our state. Our organization came together because the public health and safety for Colorado youth was considered last in the priorities when setting up the regulatory framework for marijuana. And I understand and have appreciated the nuances and the differences between the two setups at this point. But I must speak at this point and let you know that our organization will always stand with protections for kids under the age of 21 from the unintended consequences of bringing a substance from the illicit market into a more regulated market. And we have worked extensively for years with the governor's office, as well as the division at the Department of Revenue, and of course with the state health department. And I just want to let everyone know that there are reasons why a lot of these rules were put in place for marijuana, both at the medical as well as the recreational model. We have no research or data on the perception of harm since we passed this particular proposition and have now implemented Senate Bill 290. So what we have is really no information to see how kids are perceiving the fact that we are now going to allow for natural medicine to be done outside of what I would call a traditional medical setting. And so I would just err that we need to be extremely cautious and really take this with a very measured and slow approach. Even to the point of, I understand the concerns about operability and money when it comes to setting up a security system. We as the public have no concept of what is the difference between $50 worth of psilocybin in a clinician's office to a young person who might obtain that outside of the system. So having the protections in place from the get-go will, in the long run, really best protect those that are not engaging in or participating in this from a financial profit standpoint. And we just want to make sure it's clear that we will look to the state to make sure that every possible protection is put in place, considering that we're all going into this as a fresh slate. And with that, I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Henny, for your comments. We'll go next to Dr. Sujatha Reddy.
Hi, my name is Sujatha Reddy. I'm a psychotherapist and a Eastern medicine practitioner called Ayurveda. I do ketamine assisted psychotherapy in my space, and this is just a suggestion that if we can put the same requirements, as we have for ketamine, it would make it easier for everybody. This almost looks like a DEI facility that we have to rules and regs that we have to follow in storing the medicine and administering. Would it be better if the client, just like how they bring their ketamine in to us, would help us if they brought the psilocybin to us, prescribed by a provider, medical provider, or a licensed manufacturer or dispensary, just like what we have with medical marijuana or those type of settings, that will probably ease a lot of this stress that I'm hearing today with all the rules and regulations, instead of making our facility like a DEI facility, to make it more therapeutic based and be more sensitive to the certain settings. And thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you, Dr. Reddy, for your comments. We will go next to Adam Foster.
Thanks so much. Adam Foster. I'm a business lawyer in Boulder and speaking on behalf of myself today. Thank you to the division for kind of setting this tone of being open and intellectually curious. And thank you to all the commentators who have followed. I think that's really appropriate for dealing with a new bill and new area like this. In terms of co-location and some of the comments that are really getting into expense, I do think a lot of this should be grounded in the legislative declaration in Proposition 122 that the voters approved, and that's at 12-170-102 now. But basically, the legislative declaration said that the current approach to mental health was failing to fulfill a lot of its promise and was failing to meet the needs of a lot of Coloradans, and that Coloradans need more tools to address mental health issues. And specifically that we need a humane, cost-effective, responsible approach. So I think what that's balancing, of course, is the reality that there are a lot of populations that have been underserved by the current mental health infrastructure, and wanting to provide services to those folks in a safe way and a responsible way, but also cost effective, right? Because a lot of these same populations have struggled with access, and that can really come down to money. So as far as that goes with co-location and some of these other comments, I guess I would just encourage folks to think in terms of what's necessary to protect public health and safety, and then not necessarily go beyond that, because we do want to balance cost and we want a variety of providers to be able to provide these services, especially folks who are licensed clinical social workers, therapists, psychologists, people who are already licensed health professionals and, for instance, specialize in treating trauma, addiction, depression, anxiety, a lot of these conditions that have really troubled a lot of folks in our society. And so we want it to be accessible for those people to be able to serve these populations, and that will then give a lot of different healthcare options, which I think is very consistent with the legislative declaration. I also think, the comment on how kids will perceive the program, that's important, and I think that's a valid comment, but I do think that it gives adults a chance to set a model for taking care of each other, caring about each other, reaching out to people who traditionally have been underserved. And I think if we're modeling that kids will pick up on that, and that it'll be setting the type of example that most of the people on this call would like to set. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam, for your comments. All right, we will take one more comment before we go ahead and take a break, and we will go to Darren Lyman. Darren, are you still on and able to unmute? Okay, we will try to come back to Darren, and we'll go to JC Trammett.
Okay, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you for having me on, and appreciate all the work that's been done so far. I was pretty much going to say the exact same thing that Dr. Reddy already said, so I'll keep it very brief. But I was wondering if we could have a separate category for solo practitioners who are not interested in storing medicine on the premises, and have the client procure and bring their own medicine to the session, And I'm wondering if doing it in that manner could eliminate some of the burdens that have already been mentioned that would be put onto solo practitioners. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for those comments. Okay, so we have a lot of folks still signed up to provide public comments. We will pick up our queue after the next section of presentation of the rules. And so if you didn't get a chance to make your comments just yet, don't worry, we will come back to you and we will try to get to everyone we have time for today. But with that, we are going to take a short 6-minute break so that we can reconvene at 10:35. And I'll just remind folks that we are on Zoom. We are going to pause the recording for now, but please make sure to mute yourself while we are on our break. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Allison, and really appreciate all the comments we've received so far. Really productive dialogue and opportunity for us to learn from your experiences and areas where you see opportunity for further development, critical to this process. So next we will be discussing, I know we heard already some comments on security standards, but we're going to get more into that. Video surveillance, transport and storage, waste disposal, and general sanitary requirements. This next section of the draft rules we are presenting here are mostly informed by the Natural Medicine Advisory Board's recommendations that were voted on in January. We included those recommendations in the materials we distributed ahead of this meeting. And I'll note that not every recommendation is incorporated in this draft because some of the recommendations will be incorporated in draft rules for future work group discussions that we'll be hosting. Additionally, we did look to our experience in cannabis to identify those baseline requirements that we feel are appropriate as a starting point here, and have taken some lessons learned from that regulatory experience to start these draft rules in a more simple place to account for the distinctions between cannabis and our regulatory expectations there, and understanding distinctions as it relates to the natural medicine regulatory space. So first, hitting on security standards, we will start our review with the standards for security in Rule 3110 on page 8 of our proposed rules. At the outset, the rule outlines basic expectations that all natural medicine businesses are responsible for complying with, including preventing unauthorized access to restricted areas. Again, that definition is on page 1 of the draft rules if you want to take a look at that. And this includes locking or monitoring exterior doors during business hours. And that is based on the advisory board's recommendation 19. Preventing unauthorized access to records, including any participant information maintained on the licensed premises, and ensuring all restricted areas are accessible only to owner and employee licensees or other personnel who are authorized to be present. This latter part around authorized personnel is something we intend to continue developing through the Healing Center specific and cultivation and manufacturing testing draft rules for future workgroup discussions. But for awareness, this hits on the Natural Medicine Advisory Board's recommendation 20. Additionally, the rule requires during hours when the facility is not operating, so outside normal business hours, that all entrances and exits to and from the restricted areas are securely locked, and that licensees have an alarm system in place to detect unauthorized entry, notify licensees if there is an unauthorized entry, and include panic buttons linked with the alarm system. So we've already heard a lot of comments that I think relate to these proposed rules related to operability concerns. So we remain interested in understanding also how this applies to Oregon's rules and the extent to which it's been proven effective or considered a best practice, and also taking into account the costs involved. We've heard from folks around cost concerns, so we remain sensitive to that as well. So we'll look to gather more information around those things. But this touches on the Natural Medicine Advisory Board's recommendations 21, 22, and 23. Again, these requirements are directly or primarily informed by the board's recommendations. These requirements are informed by those recommendations. So we look forward to more input on these proposed rules. Would suggest that if you've already shared concerns around these things that apply to these set of rules, happy to hear you reiterate that for the record. But want to also acknowledge here on the record that we see some of the comments and consider some of the comments we've already heard as relating to these rules as well. But welcome additional feedback from you all on that front. So Allison is going to take us through video surveillance requirements.
So for this section, we'll be looking at Rule 3115 on pages 9 and 10. And the draft rules really cover 5 main areas: those minimum requirements for video surveillance, surveillance equipment requirements, camera coverage and placement, location and maintenance of equipment, and then video recording and retention. The draft rule incorporates requirements and expectations, including that all natural medicine businesses must install a fully operational video surveillance and camera recording system prior to operating, that these surveillance systems must be, the recordings must be stored in a secure area made available to the division upon request, that the surveillance equipment must consist of digital or network video recorders and cameras capable of recording 24 hours a day, and recordings must be kept at least 30 days. This is another area that the Natural Medicine Advisory Board provided recommendations that we have, for the most part, incorporated into the draft rule. And those recommendations are 25 through 29 and 37 through 42 in the document we linked in the agenda. Some of the draft rule provisions may use different language than the board's recommendations in an attempt to simplify the rules while still conveying the intent of the board. And there are some recommendations that are not reflected in these draft rules because they are specific to healing center requirements that the board recommended, and we will be covering in our next work group meeting. Additionally, some recommendations were not initially incorporated because we are evaluating and balancing the cost of compliance, which we have heard from several folks today is a concern, and we want to make sure that we are appropriately evaluating cost of compliance and creating that balance. An example of that balance includes recommendations regarding camera resolution requirements or more extensive retention requirements. So we want to ensure we're working with the board to accomplish the board's intent through their recommendations, as well as taking in all of the comments you all have provided today and throughout this process to inform the rules. And with that, I'll pass it over to Kyle.
Thanks, Allison. We will turn our attention to Rule 3405 on transport and storage, and that can be found on pages 19 through 21 of the materials. The bulk of this draft rule is about transport manifests, documentation a licensee will be expected to have on hand when transporting regulated natural medicine and natural medicine product between licensed premises. This rule pulls concepts from both the Oregon psilocybin program rules for transportation and the Marijuana Enforcement Division rules for transport. One aspect of the rule that we pulled from the Oregon rules requires licensees transporting regulated natural medicine to store the natural medicine in a locked, secured area shielded from view from outside the vehicle. This is consistent with the advisory board's recommendation 18 that all licensees are responsible for the security of products in transit. Notably, we see transport manifests or a similar document as a critical component of ensuring accountability and integrity in the transportation process between licensees and for drivers. Our goal with this draft rule is to make it as clear and streamlined as possible to include only that information most important for licensees to ensure records related to transportation are valid and verifiable. The proposed manifest requirements are a starting place, and we'd like to hear from stakeholders whether there is additional information we should be requiring on transport manifest, and also want to flag here that this is an area we anticipate evolving as we develop draft rules around inventory tracking, which is slated for a later work group conversation. The other highlights from this rule are in paragraphs G and H on page 20, outlining each licensee's responsibilities to weigh product prior to transport and upon receipt to confirm the information is accurately reflected on the manifest and to document any discrepancies on that manifest. I'll kick it back to Allison for waste disposal.
All right, thanks, Kyle. So now we're looking at Rule 3120 on page 11, addressing waste disposal. And the purpose of this rule is to ensure that any waste products are disposed of in a way that prevents mycelium from producing fruiting bodies outside of a restricted area, as recommended by the Natural Medicine Advisory Board through the Data Products and Research Subcommittee, as well as directed through the law regarding preventing diversion. This is an area that we had started gathering input on during the listening sessions over the past several months. And we would like to hear from folks about not only the draft rule we've put forward for consideration, but other ways we could be approaching this question of how to appropriately dispose of waste. Our primary goal here is to ensure that mycelium and products containing mycelium spores are not going to spontaneously produce fruiting bodies in a way that are going to maybe be abused in the future. And then to ensure that regulated natural medicine is for some reason not safe to consume, that regulated natural medicine is handled to prevent someone getting a hold of it and consuming it. I want to draw your attention specifically to paragraph F on page 11, which states that any waste containing psilocybin may be disposed of by composting, mixing the product with inactive ingredients, or heating the product or substrate to 212 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is what our research and previous information gathering has suggested is an appropriate approach to accomplish our goal. But we are looking for your input to help inform if we're striking the right balance here or if we're neglecting other approaches that could be addressed through the rule. The rule also includes restrictions on how licensees dispose of liquid waste, chemical, dangerous, or hazardous waste, which are not imposing any new or different requirements than what is already required of any other business. Rather, these provisions remind licensees that there are regulations outside of the natural medicine that they may need to comply with depending on what kind of waste they're generating. With that, it's back to Kyle.
Thank you, Allison. And to finish up our presentation of the draft rules, we'll focus on the general sanitary requirements. This is Rule 3125 and can be found on pages 12 and 13. General sanitary requirements seek to provide the minimum cleanliness standards for all natural medicine businesses. There may be additional requirements in the specific license type rules that would be discussed during later work groups. But the general sanitary requirements provide the baseline for cleanliness to protect public health and safety. First, the general sanitary rules provide that individuals are required to observe general hygienic practices while on duty and should be excluded from the licensed premises until a condition is addressed that could result in the contamination of regulated natural medicine or natural medicine product. Second, this rule provides general sanitary requirements for the licensed premises. These requirements include keeping the licensed premises free from litter and waste, ensuring that floors, walls, and ceilings are constructed in a manner that they can be cleaned. There's adequate lighting in areas where natural medicine and natural medicine product is processed, manufactured, sampled, tested, packaged, and labeled, and where equipment and utensils are cleaned. That premises are free from pests. Premises are maintained to limit or prevent microorganism growth. We just want to acknowledge there is a typo in this paragraph 7 on page 12 where it should say sanitary condition. Continuing on, it also requires any toxic cleaning compounds, sanitizers, or chemicals to be stored of and disposed of in a manner that protects against contamination of product and in accordance with applicable state, local, or federal law, rule, regulation, or ordinance. And that cultivation materials and ingredients are stored in a manner that prevents the growth of undesirable microorganisms. Finally, this rule requires toilet and hand washing facilities. This rule further requires that healing centers have toilet and hand washing facilities available to participants, which is consistent with Natural Medicine Advisory Board recommendations. That concludes the rules presentation. I will just kick it back to Dominique or Allison if there's anything to add before we go to public comment.
Thanks, Kyle. Yes, and just with what you covered around sanitary requirements, this is, I think, pretty standard regulatory language on how facilities should be set up in a way that is preventing contamination type issues. We also see the potential of how this will apply, maybe some distinction of how this will look as it relates to oversight and regulation of, you know, what we would expect and risks associated with what's occurring on the facility of a, you know, manufacturing operation, a cultivation compared to a healing center. So just want to recognize that. I think we are ready to open it up for public comment at this stage, and we'll look to go back into the queue where we had some folks already signed up who didn't get to speak earlier. Allison.
Yeah, thanks, Dominique. As you just said, we are going to pick up the queue, focus, and we'll start with people who have not yet had a chance to speak. And then if we have time, we'll revisit folks who've either signed up again or didn't have a chance to finish their comments. And just for everyone's awareness, to give folks a little bit more heads up about when they're going to be called on, I will be saying who is up next after the person who is speaking as well. So we are going to start with Jamie Dirks, and after Jamie, we'll go to Dr. Ben Haas. Jamie?
Hi, Jamie Dirks, Collins. I'm with Thrive Health Consultants. My wife, Erica Cowan, is with me, and like to also echo the department's work thus far. It's a lot of effort, a lot of moving parts, so we appreciate the flexibility. Also appreciate you hearing us today. We would like to agree with and echo the majority of what we've heard today, particularly as it pertains to smaller practitioners not having, I like the idea of maybe the client or patient brings their medicine with them in certain occasions, certain areas in a healing center that may be more appropriate to have a camera or one particular recording, but the rest of the practice may not need it because they see a client for different situations that may not be involving practice. To the most recent presentation on transport with all of those manifests and documentation seems potentially appropriate for leaders, but maybe not as relevant to those who are just transporting 5 grams of mushrooms, for example. I know I'd like to, anything else from that?
The hospice
and to further iterate about how those types of burdensome types of restrictions can limit access to particular things like palliative care, end of life, mental health for marginalized indigenous communities, veterans, ones who particularly benefit by more accessibility. So we appreciate your time and thank you for your efforts.
Thank you for your comments. We will go now to Dr. Ben Haas, and after Dr. Haas, we'll go to Darren Lyman. Dr. Haas.
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great, thanks for having me on. And as everybody's mentioned, thanks for your hard work in putting this together. I just wanted to just introduce myself. I'm a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese herbal medicine, and I have my own private practice here in Denver. I've been in practice for 23 years. And I just want to concur that, you know, with everybody who's mentioned that the burden of surveillance and then potentially the age limit on certain areas, including the co-location of administration, along with, you know, other types of therapies that people might be doing, would be really prohibitive for most of the practitioners that want to come into this regulated space. So I just wanted to reiterate that you know, everybody's comments regarding that are on point. Myself, I'm an acupuncturist, herbalist, and I do mindfulness coaching and shamanic healing, and interested in multimodality clinic. And I want to incorporate natural medicines as well as traditional evidence-based healing practices. And I'm particularly interested in conducting research studies on potential beneficial effects of incorporating things such as acupuncture on natural medicine journeys to reduce anxiety, discomfort, nausea, et cetera. And so, you know, the restrictions on having specific areas that are administration areas, and those are, you know, hard segregated from areas where other types of modalities would be administered, would really require practices to be, you know, much larger and therefore much more burdensome. And so I think having, as someone had mentioned, the restriction being on administration, not on space, in terms of the age allowance. So when spaces are used for the administration of natural medicine, they are prohibited. but that would not necessarily restrict other uses on other days from the same rooms, at least on the administration side, not the storage side. But I think the main thing is that the above ground use of these medicines is in its infancy. And so all the tools and techniques used with clients during administration are going to be really varied. And there's going to be a lot of experimentation, trial and error, trying to find the best practices and techniques. And so by prematurely forcing out, a lot of different practitioners in favor of large players is going to homogenize the process and could end up really hampering this process of innovation and discovery, and could just drive a lot of it back into the unregulated space. So again, that's my comment, and thanks very much for doing this.
Thank you, Dr. Hawes, for your comments. We'll go now to Darren Lyman, and after Darren Lyman, we'll go to David. Darren?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, but it's a little muffled. If you could get, yeah.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes, that's better.
Okay. I just wanted to note on the security that a off-site monitor would work just as good as a room for storage of the data that we're recording. And also I wanted to note that there's a lot of miscommunication about Amanita muscaria mushrooms, which are not psilocybin mushrooms and have never been illegal. They are poisonous mushrooms. That's the red and white mushroom. And a lot of people are confusing the two. Amanita is not part of this. It's a poisonous mushroom and not psilocybin mushrooms. I just wanted to note that for all of the caregivers and people out there who are getting into this, stay away from the red and white mushrooms. They cause neurological damage. That's all I have to say. I agree with a lot of the other things as far as the security and monitoring. Other people have.
Thank you, Darren, for those comments. Okay, we will go next to David, and after David, we'll go to Christoph Justin. David, are you still on and able to unmute? Okay, we will come back to you, David, to see if we can get you connected. We'll go to Christoph Justin, and after Christoph Justin will be Jill McCormick. Oh, I apologize, not Jill McCormick. We'll go to Frank Dayish. Apologies for that. Christoph.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can.
All right, good news. Thank you. Hey, I'm Christoph Justin. I'm representing Quantum Mycology. I'm on the cultivation space of this platform. I've been listening from the catch-all since day one, paying attention last year. I'm measuring the temperature of the room of all pillars represented, and I see some holes in cultivation to deployment regarding security risk, regarding contamination. I'm curious more so around what I'm aware of is like how many of these facilitators, insurance people, building owners, and representation around the rooms are actually cultivators. So in my space, I have a private lab in the natural medicine space for private use myself. And I'm skilled and successful in mycology outside the psilocybin space as well, with turkey tail and other medicinals regarding tincture, etc. And I think where I'm curious or wondering everybody else's knowledge around cultivation. We also have tracking in handling and what does work and what doesn't work. Spores are inert. We definitely have like a health risk regarding handling and transportation, but we're also dealing with organic biomass. So if I were to grow like non-psilocybin mushrooms, go down to the farmer's market, I can do that, right? In a non-psilocybin space. So we have like just different handling operatives with being like organic farmer next to, psilocybin. So I think it's something to consider in rulemaking and or just awareness in how we regulate what we're paying attention to and how many roadblocks or barriers we're putting in front of ourselves regarding this space. So I'm not a therapist. I'm not a insurance person. I am a commercial general contractor. So I know how to build space. And I also have built restaurants and kitchens and bars and breweries. So I know about, the health department. I know about, fire. I know about security. I know about egress. I know about a lot of things in the building space that I could be instrumental in speaking with anybody about. However, I'm seeing some roadblocks with some of this integration. And I think that's really all I'm kind of chiming in on. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for your comment, and just want to mention that we've appreciated all the feedback we've heard, and where it is tied back to our guiding principles around operability, defensibility, ensuring that we're really thoughtfully thinking through this and working together to get to a good place in supporting the development of operable regulations in this space. And of course, the last thing we are trying to do here is create, barriers to participation in this space. We are really looking at this through the lens of what is that mandatory rulemaking? What are those mandatory rulemaking subjects we need to hit on? That said, we are really looking to strike the right balance here around operability, addressing what we need to under the law that we are directed to implement here, while also ensuring that your feedback helps us hit that balance and ensure that we are getting to an operable place that is operable both from the regulatory perspective and those who want to be a part of this regulated space. So thank you for that. I will also just share more broadly that for those who've made a public comment here today, reminding folks we do have a written comment form, and the extent to which folks have any challenges with the written comment form that we have, want to share that there is an option for somebody to send us email feedback that will be also incorporated into the rule record, as well as in the form, there is a place where you can just upload your comment or any materials that you would like. So we want to make sure that there is an easy process for you to submit your written feedback. If you have issues with that, please let us know in a productive way so that we can make sure that we are supporting the opportunity for written feedback. Thank you.
Okay, we will go now to Frank Dayish, and after Frank, we'll go to Michael Ashley Bearden. Frank? Frank, if you're able to unmute and provide your comment, and if not, we can always come back to you. Okay, we will come back to Frank, and feel free to send me a chat if you're having difficulties unmuting, and we can try to troubleshoot that. We'll go to Michael Ashley Bearden, and after Michael, we'll go to Lloyd Cubbins. Michael?
Hello, thank you. So yeah, just wanted to say first off, thank you for all the work that you've done for everybody's comments. This is really important stuff, and it's really important to get as right as we can. And just had a general question around kind of the age restrictions on that, specifically in, talking about end of life care, palliative care, all that good stuff. There might be a desire from somebody that is approaching the end of their life, that is going through a session, that would want to have a child present, other family members present for that experience. They wouldn't be consuming, the compounds or the substances themselves, but the opportunity to provide a really healing experience for that family that's dealing with a significant situation, could be really powerful. And so just wanted to offer that as a consideration because ultimately a lot of trauma that people experience is relational trauma. And so having folks there that can be supportive in that environment could be really helpful, really healing. And so, just interested in consideration around that point for supportive people for whoever is doing the journey that might not be 21, that would not be consuming medicines at all during the sessions, but just being there for support. Thank you.
Michael, that's very helpful context. Thank you.
Great. We will go next to Lloyd Covens, and I appreciate Michael kept your comments short as I forgot to start our timer. So I'm back on it now. Lloyd, please.
Thanks to the Natural Medicines Division and all of your folks there in Golden for working so hard on putting this together. It is a broad amount of topics and rulemaking. I know Dora is implicitly involved, and my frustration has been written comments are not categorized. So for starters, I would say the form or the input should say mushroom psilocybin or everything else, because we're, I think, conflating what these rules would mean in that context of what is the product being served and administered. But getting back to all of the comments, which I agreed with from the small and medium-sized healthcare providers, therapists, there is an overdose of cannabis, like 20 pounds of 30 pounds of cannabis being stored and being secure and being having surveillance upon. All of that's wonderful, except when we look at the context of psilocybin, if we have 1 ounce, again, across the nation, across the world, 1 ounce would be equivalent to no less than 6 and possibly 10 or 11 full-blown journeys. And I think the context is, could a rule be made to allow under 1 ounce to have a different kind of security, perhaps a high-tech vault that also considers dry mushrooms needs to have certain humidity? Because again, all of the folks that talked are very correct. It's not just the $50 worth of street product. It's the point of all that regulation takes away the ability to possess in Colorado, which brings us to the next question, and it was mentioned. If a therapist wants to provide facility services, are we prohibiting that client from Colorado Springs from driving to Denver with their own with their own accessed psychedelics, and then be assisted in administration? So my comment regarding surveillance is going to be cut off. I will attempt to write that down. Long story short, I would like to see us use surveillance in common areas for video, and then during the facility of the trip to have audio recording only, so that there is some level of consumer privacy and discussions which can be accessed after the experience if there is some discussions or privacy issues between the facilitator and the client that involve, frankly, altered states that might reveal financial or other private information. And the client customer should always have that access to say, this is what I believe happened during the altered event. And my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you, Lloyd, for your comments. We'll go next to Rita Saliuk, and after Rita, we'll hear from Rachel Ardenoy. Rita?
Hi, thank you so much, guys. I apologize for not understanding the rules. So my first comment would be, maybe for somebody as a dumb proof, name those rules, this document as the request to speak at the meeting, because I don't know, I couldn't find it anywhere, but maybe everybody else found it. So probably the student, I apologize for that. So The second question I have, I went through the rules and I'm not finding information that seems to be important to me, but maybe it's on DORA. I don't know, maybe it's somewhere else. I'm trying to understand how long client has to stay at the healing center after they receive a dose. And based on the dose, it also should be a different timing because some dose would take them to a 6-hour trip, but some dose, like a micro dose, might not even do anything with them. So I'm just trying to see where I missed that. And that's really important for me in order to come up with the business models of how to get this healing center working. And, you know, we also planning to maybe do cultivation and manufacturing, but I think that's straightforward. I'm planning to go through your rules, redline them, mark them and send them to you in written comments. If you can address that specific one, because I just couldn't find it. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you for the comment, and we'll just share that as you noted, some of this work, this implementation work, is also being done by our partners at DORA as it relates to requirements for facilitators, for licensed facilitators. So there is another track of implementation that is underway by our partners on that front, and so we will make sure to again include the link in our chat to DORA's webpage, and also want to make sure that folks are aware that in our DOR natural medicine division rulemaking, this is, as this is an iterative process, we have a number of different meetings that are focused on different rule topics. And so what you're seeing at this point is sort of sections of like different portions of rules that as we are developing these initial sets of rules, we're bringing them to the table to talk about them, knowing that this is not the full set. So there will be things that we are not yet hitting on that we will need to as we continue through this process in a set of multiple meetings as we get closer to the end of this year, at that point in time that we're ready to start taking in applications. So you will likely recognize that there are certain things we're not touching on yet that we will be touching on in future meetings, and that you will likely see updated or new sets of rules that hit on those sections, those subjects that we also need to make sure we're doing rules around. So we'll just encourage folks to both see what is happening and updates, look for updates on both DORA's website as it relates to facilitator licensing and the work of the Natural Medicine Advisory Board. And then also please take a look at our Department of Revenue's Natural Medicine Division website so that you can see we already have all of the meetings and subjects that we're hitting on scheduled, and you'll see that in a table so that you can just track when we're going to be hitting on some of these subjects.
I appreciate it. And just one comment, if there's certain sections that you know that are going to be coming up, if you guys maybe can put those titles of the section in the document and just say that it's coming later. So then because it's not on DORA either side so far, maybe coming somewhere, maybe in both.
And if you look at least for the Department of Revenue, if you look at our webpage, you'll see the subjects and the dates for each meeting, but it does hit on the specific subjects that we're planning to hit on so that you have advance notice of every topic that we're going to be hitting on in that meeting.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, Dominique and Rita. And also we do have Lori Bratton, the program director for the Department of Regulatory Agency's Natural Medicine Services program. So Lori, was there anything you would like to add?
Sure. Thank you so much, Allison. I just wanted to add that topic actually on dosage is coming up in this Friday's meeting, which you can see the agenda online on our webpage under the calendar. You would click on the calendar for this Friday's meeting and you can listen in. You can certainly join and hear what the discussion is around from the advisory board subcommittee members on dosage. So I hope that's helpful for you to find that information out.
I appreciate it. I'll just wait a little bit. Thank you so much, guys.
Great. Okay, we're going to go next to Rachel Ardenoy, and after Rachel, we'll go to Mick Bland. Rachel?
Thanks so much, Allison, Dominique, everybody, for your presentations. And amazing that this is like happening in real time. When's the question? Oh, it's coming up on Friday. I love that. I'm a regulatory attorney. I've worked before the MED for 9 years now. And I recognize the items that we're pulling from MED regs and trying to see how they may apply over here in natural medicine. And so I think one idea I had especially based on a lot of the comments we're hearing that are very enlightening, especially about end of life, you know, where there may want to be minors in, is maybe we need to reorganize how we're defining sections of limited access areas and not just have what we're used to on the cannabis side of like limited access and restricted access. I think we maybe need to be a little bit more creative, and then we can apply different standards to different defined areas of licensed premises. And what I mean by that is striking a balance for, of course, public safety and, you know, lack of diversion to youth by having certain sections of licensed premises for cultivation and manufacturing, and having rules applied to those sections, like obviously no youth access, everyone needs to be badged, you know, really having those kind of under more lock and key for not only public safety for youth diversion, but illegal diversion, robberies, things of that nature, things that we see you know, in the cannabis industry. So perhaps we have some, you know, definitions on what the licensed and restricted access areas of a cultivation or manufacturing facility look like versus what we're defining as in the licensed premises at the healing centers, because we don't want to limit, you know, that support system, especially when we're trying to do this in a wellness and mental health capacity. And so maybe we could have different restrictions on administration areas versus storage areas. And then I think this also kind of parlays into inventory tracking. So if there is some limitation, and that's been brought up a few times here on, if there's a limitation on quantity limits for licensed premises, licensed healing centers, then, you know, maybe there is a lesser risk of diversion of all these things if the healing centers can only have a certain amount on site. And that's really just managing that supply chain and keeping most of it at the manufacturer's facilities, or perhaps an option for a distribution center type license type that would, you know, that held or you know, the product prior to it being on site. So that way we don't have to worry so much about the surveillance and such at the licensed healing centers. And I think one thing that we should be looking toward, and there's many people on these calls, is in the healthcare realm, you know, when people are going to therapists and going to see other health practitioners, what are the surveillance and security requirements there? What has worked, what hasn't worked? That's been going on for a long time. And I think that we know, and we will see that will bear that there's not, you know, a significant amount of that security and surveillance aspect at that aspect of the supply chain for wellness services. So thank you. That was my time.
Thank you, Rachel, for your comment. And we've mentioned a couple times and also have heard as well just feedback around areas that we have brought forward initial proposed rules that are in part taken from aspects of our experience in cannabis regulation or sections of rules, but want to be clear again, that we aren't necessarily taking rule in entirety from the marijuana regulations and then just placing them here. We're really trying to be thoughtful and looking at aspects that may be relevant to generate comments and public feedback so that we can determine, is this the right place to land? How does this need to be refined further? And also the fact that we very much recognize that there's a big difference between these programs and respect that. And so appreciate how our approach has generated really valuable dialogue. And also the fact that, as we've noted, a lot of these rules we're proposing are also informed directly by the recommendations of the Natural Medicine Advisory Board. As well as watching what Oregon is doing and looking closely at what their rules are, while we also have an interest in further assessing what has been successful and where has that maybe raised some challenges based on Oregon's regulations. So just want to be very clear about how we're approaching this and not just looking to cannabis as the place to start.
We're going to go next to Mick Bland. And after Mick, we will go back to Stephanie Crone to see if she is able to unmute and provide her comments. Mick.
Hello, this is Frank Dash. Whenever you can get to me, thank you.
Thank you, Frank. You'll be up in the queue here in a few. Mick Bland, are you able to unmute and provide your comments?
Yeah, I'm not sure if you can hear me. I thought I deleted my question. I believe it's more appropriate to the cultivation section, so I'll ask it at that time.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll go next to Stephanie Crone. Stephanie, are you with us and able to unmute to provide your comments?
My questions were answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. All right, then Frank, please provide your comments.
Hi, my name is Frank Dayish, and I'm representing myself. And I wanted to, I heard some comments earlier about ensuring that we follow the protocol of the great state of Colorado in terms of statutory requirements. And I think that we should adhere to it. And as we move forward, we should be very cautious and also making sure that we comply with what has been presented so far. I'm in complete agreement with that in terms of age limitation, in terms of restrictions on lobby, in terms of young people picking up their parents, things of that nature. So all those, we should ensure that we move forward very carefully. And the lessons learned from the state of Oregon, I mentioned, I heard Oregon mentioned a couple of times. I know that Colorado doesn't want to follow that same experience. And as we move forward, I'd like to be really cautious. And what I've seen so far seems to be a very positive move in the right direction. And so the more restrictions there are to ensure that we make sure we take care of the Colorado citizens, and then also to ensure that we take care of Native American citizens as well. So I wanted to make sure that I provided that comment. And then also I want to extend my appreciation to all of you. You've done an excellent job up to this point, so I really appreciate it. And then we'll go ahead and submit some written comments as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your comments, Frank. All right, we'll go back to David. David, are you able to unmute to provide your comments? If you're joining by phone, you may have to use *6 as well. Okay, David, I'll follow up with you in the chat to see if we can resolve whatever issues are preventing you from unmuting to provide your comments. Okay, so we're going to revisit some folks who didn't either sign up to make additional comments or didn't have a chance to make a comment at the beginning. So Michaela Vaught, if you would like to finish your comments.
Hi, thank you. Yes, just wanted to go back. Sorry, pulling up my notes. Just wanted to reiterate that I do believe there are some alternatives. So regarding the security requirements for small operators, for those who have healing center licenses and are storing less than $500 of natural medicine, it seems relevant that the security costs shouldn't be more expensive than what the security measures intend to protect. In most cases, I believe a secure safe, IP-based camera, and inventory log are all that's really needed. For businesses located in larger commercial real estate buildings, some of the required camera vantage points listed in the draft rules would require the approval of the entire commercial building of the owner of the building to place any type of surveillance equipment outside of the business's contracted suite space to get like that external view of the entrance to the licensed premises, as well as agreement from any of the nearby businesses whose clients would then be recorded via those cameras walking through those same halls. I mentioned the rough estimate of $15,000 to $20,000 earlier, not including some of the other costs associated with obtaining city permits. So wanted to propose potential solution of maybe you doing a subsidy program for smaller businesses and private practices that can't feasibly cover the cost of all those requirements. Maybe some type of tiered program. So while large agencies and corporations are subject to full costs, maybe small businesses and private practices are given options for reduced prices on licenses, assistance with security systems, maybe vouchers toward payments for excess spaces, etc. Regarding the transport of natural medicine for small operators, the equity subcommittee of the Natural Medicine Advisory Board had explicitly recommended rules that allow facilitators to provide services independently of a healing center. But the current rules would prevent that option by requiring an employee license in order to transport natural medicine. as well as prevent that option because of some of these other restrictions. As highlighted by the equity subcommittee, this significantly decreases access to areas of Colorado that are likely having fewer healing centers available. Allowing participants to bring their own medicine is a potential solution, though brings up questions regarding the burden of liability if the medicine doesn't meet potency and purity standards or is otherwise laced or tampered with by the participant prior to the session. Transportation rules work well for licensed businesses transporting large quantities of natural medicine to other licensed businesses. However, they don't work for facilitators who might be transferring small amounts of natural medicine to a private residence, to a clinic for a single session. Also, the rules seem a little confusing in that not all facilitators may be an employee of a healing center. So it seems like there should be an option for an independent facilitator to contract with the healing center or otherwise access space for facilitation without being an employee. So maybe we are clarifying the extensive burdensome transportation requirements by only applying those to natural business licensees and not to facilitators providing natural medicine services, or allowing facilitators to transport natural medicines in addition to owner licenses and employee licenses.
Thank you for those comments. All right, we'll go next to Tasha Poinsett, and after Tasha, we'll go to Lizette Kassarin. So Tasha, please.
Thanks, Allison. I'm Tasha Poinsett. I am representing myself and I'm with the Healing Advocacy Fund. So my comments, I think, were similar to a lot of what Mickey just touched on. We wanted to add a little bit about this kind of question around transportation. Specifically had a question around the fact that it looks like only somebody with an owner license or an employee license could transport natural medicines. And I know that there's been discussion of allowing facilitation at private residences in certain cases, such as hospice and other situations where there's barriers to leaving the home. And so wanted to make sure that there are either here or somewhere rules that would allow facilitators to actually do that transport, so that multiple people wouldn't be having to make the trip to someone's home. And then similarly, thinking about rural access, we've had conversations with people in rural parts of the state who have highlighted that it's unlikely in certain areas that there might be a healing center established just because of the costs associated with it or other barriers. But there might be opportunities, for instance, for a facilitator to travel to a rural health clinic that could have, again, as we touched on earlier, sort of a temporary license for facilitation at that location. And so I think creating the flexibility for facilitators to be able to transport in these kind of contexts will be important. And again, as Mickey touched on again, looking to reduce some of the, I guess, for lack of a better word, like the maybe bureaucracy around transporting smaller amounts of natural medicines. I think maybe looking closely at the requirement for an alarm system for the vehicle, or some of these other pieces. And then the other thing that I wanted to touch on that I started to speak to earlier is I saw that there's a placeholder within the reporting section of the rules in regards to what kind of records facilitators should be required to keep. And definitely want to encourage requirements for certain types of records, for instance, number of clients accessing services, why are people accessing services, how long are the sessions, what doses at different ranges, so that we can understand, what is the average dose, ideally be able to look at relationships. If there's more adverse events, for instance, at higher dosages, it would be helpful to be getting that kind of information as we roll out the program, so that potentially to inform future regulatory changes, but also just so that we can learn from this program. So I think in general, Senate Bill 303 in Oregon, which passed, will go into effect next year, lays out a solid foundation for different types of records that might be required in Colorado as well. So that would be a first place to look to inform that. And then hopefully having a discussion and stakeholder input specifically on that topic to inform those requirements with facilitator involvement as well.
Thank you, Tasha. And I just wanted to highlight quickly, in case it's not clear in the rules itself, that the proposed rule for transport and storage is specific to transporting natural medicine, regulated natural medicine between licensed premises. And so that would be business to business transfers that we are contemplating would, include more product than, for example, transport to a healthcare facility for an administration session or something along those lines. Appreciate your comments and would love to see proposed rule language to help clarify these distinctions. I also wanted to highlight that in the law, as adopted in Senate Bill 290, neither cultivations or manufacturers are permitted to transfer regulated natural medicine directly to a facilitator. So that is something that, as Dominique mentioned at the beginning, Senate Bill 24-198 is seeking to address and clarify. And so we anticipate that these transport rules will also evolve depending on whatever happens with that pending legislation, as well as if we work through this rulemaking process. All right, we'll go now to Lizette Kasserin.
Hi, good afternoon, good morning. Thank you all for the work that you're doing. I have a couple of questions for you guys. One of them principally is the safety piece, right? It's been announced that MAPS is the organization that is going to lead a lot of the safety and training programs. And my question is, do you guys have a requirement for companies that are bidding to do and lead this ways to having good standing? Because MAPS has been sued for sexual assault, which was actually recorded on video surveillance, elder abuse, and also wrongful death. So my question to you is, how do you decide to have this organization lead the training for the Colorado area with all of these things that are happening? Because I'm assuming that you require companies to be in good standing. And so this is to me very worrisome because we're talking about harm reduction. And even with video surveillance, there were instances of sexual assault, elder abuse, and obviously wrongful death, because these medicines open you up. And so my question to you is, what's the process of awarding this big projects to them? And also, how do you think video surveillance is going to prevent anything when a sexual assault has been happening on video surveillance? That's my first question. My second question is about accessibility. Obviously, you're putting license upon license and restriction upon restriction. And a lot of the people that are traumatized and need healing do not have the money to pay $3,000 to $4,000 for a session like this. So how are you working on the affordability issue, given that insurance companies are probably not going to cover this? And there is a lot of financial barriers. In Oregon, you guys have been talking about Oregon. In Oregon, clinics are already closing because of the lack of patients, because people cannot afford the amounts of money that it's going to be required to go through these sessions. And then my last question is about Indigenous access. Several people in several meetings have talked about Indigenous access. You guys don't comment back on it. I would love to know why you don't comment on it. You just gloss over it. And also, I want to ask, how you guys came up with the age cutoff, because in Indigenous traditions, sitting and having relationships with this medicine are part of our rites of passage. So I don't understand why you can send a kid to the military to do very horrible things and get traumatized at 18, but they won't have access until they're 21. So those are the questions that I have for you. Thank you so much for letting me speak. And I look forward to hearing your responses.
Hey, Lizette, thank you for your questions, and we'll address what we're able to here in this public meeting, recognizing that the rulemaking process isn't necessarily intended to have a Q&A type format, but as you recognize where there are opportunities for us to address questions or certain comments, we want to make sure that we're doing that as we're able to, recognizing there may need to be a need for us to follow up on areas so that we can make sure that we are engaging thoughtfully and providing comprehensive information that we see as responsive to what we're hearing and questions that are being asked. I will first just share that we do not have a contract with MAPS, so that's not something that the state has engaged in. I understand there was an arrangement at the local level with the city of Denver that may have involved MAPS, but can't speak to that specifically. So we do not have a contract with any organization around training. The law does mandate the Department of Revenue, and we've already been engaging in this work to provide educational materials and training resources to first responders. And so what we've been doing is going across the state and engaging directly, our team, myself included, and others here on the call, engaging directly with law enforcement agencies, other first responders, to be able to understand where we can be supportive of any materials that may be useful to creating awareness and understanding what the law provides here in the state. And so that is how we've been engaging in this work. We do not have a contract with MAPS or any other organization around training. Also related to, there were a couple of other things you mentioned. Oh, fees was another piece. We have not established fees at this point. What we have announced at the beginning of our rulemaking and in our listening sessions is that we are really sensitive to the barriers that can be created by the fees that we set. And as a cash funded agency, we are required to establish fees that reflect the direct and indirect costs of the work that we're doing to administer and implement this program. That is a directive in the law. That said, this is a reason why we are really starting small and incrementally with how we're even staffing this new agency, to be very sensitive to how that informs the fees that we are establishing. Our goal here is to engage in these substantive conversations around the rules that we're establishing and the details of those rules before we even talk about fees, so that we can understand how the proposed rules and where we look at landing with our final proposed rules will ultimately inform what those fees look like. So we are, understanding the concerns around that and are looking to engage in that very
big girl, look at you.
Very carefully before we look to have conversations around fees, and also making sure that we're transparent about when we have a rulemaking to establish those fees, that we're clear around how, what is informing that as it relates to the direct and indirect costs. So there's more to come on that front, and we appreciate just the concerns that you've raised on that front. Also, as it relates to Indigenous communities, we have engaged, as we've mentioned, across the state directly and looked at initially federally recognized tribes here in the state of Colorado, but recognize that there is a broader engagement that needs to be had. There is a work group that is required to be stood up, and that work is going to be done by the Department of Regulatory Agencies. I don't know if our partners here have more to share on that, but we will certainly be sure to share more information so that folks are able to track that information and have an opportunity to listen in and participate.
That would be great. And also, I've requested to have a percentage of Indigenous representations in those boards, because we noticed that there is a board of 20 people and then you have 2 people that are Indigenous. And as you said, you have federal recognized tribes here who may or may have not used psilocybin as one of their rites of passage. We're talking about, immigrants. These territories were part of Mexico, and as immigrants here, we have that lineage. We use that psilocybin, and we use that as a rite of passage. So the last question that I asked was about the age cutoff, and I would love to get more information on that, and also the transparency of how much Indigenous people are representing on these working meetings, because I typically see 1 or 2 out of 20 people.
Sure, thank you for that. And I know our colleague Ross Hugerheide with the Department of Law did touch on this piece with the age restriction. That is something that is established directly in the law, and we are charged with administering that, implementing it. And so that's what I can share at this stage, is that age limitation is established directly in the law, and we are responsible for carrying that through. And as it relates to the information around the advisory board, that is something that we do not facilitate at the Department of Revenue. That the work done in having conversations and hosting meetings among the members of the advisory board, that is done by the Department of Regulatory Agencies. I know that we have some folks listening in, so that can inform any sort of feedback they can provide, if not today, then at a later time. Thank you again for your comments and questions.
Yes, and I'm happy to jump in. This is Lori Bratton, as Program Director for Natural Medicine here at DORA, to kind of respond in regards to the working group. I know that Dr. Beers mentioned it earlier, and the recent comments, and we are we are working on establishing the federally recognized American Tribes and Indigenous Community Working Group. This was established under SB 23290, and its purpose is for engaging and creating a dialogue to identify issues related to the commercialization of natural medicine product, and natural medicine services for tribal and indigenous people, communities, cultures, and religions. So we are very close to completing the formation of the working group. And in the next few weeks, we were going to post information about the members of the working group, the focus of the working group, meeting dates, which will occur over the next year or so, and they will discuss the topics that we know that are concerning. And the majority of the working group are federally recognized Indigenous community members. And so there is a large representation with that group, and please, those meetings will be public. So please feel free to join and listen in to what they're discussing. And in addition, we also have other upcoming meetings, which you can find, as I mentioned before, on our website. So we have a meeting on this Friday, which is a combined subcommittee meeting. We have a meeting on the 19th, which is the full board, the natural medicine full board meeting, which occurs monthly. And then we will add in the monthly working group meetings coming up, hopefully to begin in May. And additionally, we will have a stakeholder meeting on April 26th that's going to cover our standards of practice. Those rules are going to be posted on our website either today or tomorrow. The draft version of the second section, which is standards of practice, and section 6, and advertising, section 7. So a lot of the lingering questions about missing information is coming. We're working on that, and we have lots of work ahead of us. So I just wanted to respond, and feel free to reach out to me with other questions regarding those meeting dates. Thanks.
Thanks, Lori, for providing all that information. So we are going to shift to wrapping up, and I apologize to folks who had already provided comments but had signed up again. We won't have time to get back to you today, although I am pleased that everyone who did sign up to provide comments and was able to participate in this meeting today. So talking about next steps, we, as we mentioned, this was just our second work group meeting, and we had announced 8 at the beginning of our process. We have at least 6 more, although we anticipate there will be opportunities to announce additional work group meetings to either revisit rules that we've already discussed or to dig deeper into draft rules. Thank you all for attending online today. We appreciate your thoughtful feedback and your participation in this process of creating rules for the regulated natural medicine business space. As always, we will be posting the materials from this work group, including the recording of the meeting, as well as the slide deck from this meeting on our website by the end of the week, but we always aim to do that within 24 hours. This is also a good time to flag, particularly for any new attendees. Our website includes a place for folks to subscribe to receive updates from the Natural Medicine Division. Signing up helps ensure you receive the latest updates about our implementation work and upcoming meetings. So please check out that website and consider how you want to receive information about our work. If you did not get a chance or were not ready to provide comments during our meeting today, we want to be clear that there will be additional opportunities in future work group meetings, as well as at the final hearing on July 25th. Additionally, we encourage anyone with information, perspectives, or proposed rule language to submit written comments using the division's written comment form like Dominique was talking about earlier. That includes a space to upload a document if you want to type your comment just in a separate document and then upload it. And you're also welcome to email us if you have questions about the rulemaking process. You can reach me at allisonrobinette@state.co.us, as well as our senior policy advisor, Amelia Myers. Our next work group meeting will be on May 1st from 9 to noon. We anticipate that this meeting will focus solely on healing center requirements. which may include revisiting some of the draft rules we presented today around security and record keeping requirements, as well as other requirements that were recommended by the Natural Medicine Advisory Board. Our meeting on May 1st will have an in-person attendance option as well at our offices in Lakewood. So we are looking forward to continuing this process with you all and seeing some of you in person next month. So with that, Kyle, do you have anything you'd like to add before we close out for today?
I think you covered it, Allison. Appreciate everyone joining us and providing feedback today. Thanks.
Great. Well, we hope you all have a wonderful and beautiful rest of your week, and we will see you in May.
Thanks.